Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. This is a fun episode. We're going to do something a little bit different. For those that have been following the podcast for a few years, you know that normally I do a short little 15-minute episode where we ask the guest the same 5 questions and so forth. But many of you will recognize Bethany Rees. She is the author of Leadership on the Rocks. And I loved her book, and I decided to bring her back. And this episode, we're going to do it a little bit different format. We're just going to talk about her book and her framework for leadership development. I was very impressed by it, and I wanted to bring her back and just have a nice casual conversation to talk about that. You're going to get some great nuggets of wisdom from our conversation today. So make sure you either record it or go back and watch it, take notes, whatever you got to do there, because there's some great things. I'm very excited about this. So Bethany, thank you again for taking time to be on the podcast and to talk about your book. I'm very excited about it. First of all, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds here. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and kind of what your endeavors are and some of those things, and then we'll get into the book.
Awesome. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for having me. I am no one special. I am every man, every woman, an average person. I live in Arkansas, so like one of the smallest states in the nation. My background is really in education. And so who am I to even be on this podcast? I still ask that question. But I have been in leadership. I was a teacher. I became a high school administrator, opened high school. And then we moved from the Houston area, and now I'm into leadership coaching. But what I learned through all of that was a lot of hard lessons. And I have found to be thankful for those hard lessons learned. And that's how I wrote the book, Leadership on the Rocks, of how to turn what you feel like is on the rocks as in failure into actually it's a foundation that I build my life and my leadership on. So that's where it all came from and how I got into doing what I'm doing.
Oh, I love it. And it's a great perspective because so many of the leadership consultants and coaches that I have talked to over the years have been from different backgrounds. I don't know that I've had any of them come from education. And yet it's such a huge part of our society. I'm just amazed. I'm sitting here going, how have we not had an educator kind of move over into leadership development and help us understand that perspective a little bit? So
Absolutely. I think education is the hub of society. It's where everything plays out. You have obviously the education for future skills that are going into, future jobs, future citizens. But then you also have all the family dynamics at play, all of the politics and policies and economic workforce. So it really is the hub of society. But I know I'm biased.
well, I don't think I'm biased, but I would tend to agree with you though, because it feels like that's where everything intersects. You, just as you said a second ago, but you got all the politics and the government, you've got the families, you've got the students themselves, you've got the teachers, and everybody's just kind of right there. They're all over until right there at school.
Talking about diverse stakeholders, education has them.
Yes, that's an accurate way to describe that. Well, let's talk a little bit more of kind of the background of the book. I'm curious to know, you've given us a little bit of background as far as you were an educator. Tell us that moment where you felt like, I've got to put this into a book. What was kind of the inspirational moment where you realized, I got to do it this way?
Nobody ever lives their life setting out to write a book. Maybe some people out there, some really gifted people. But I got what I would call a skip level promotion. I went from being an instructional coach, helping teachers become the best educator to engage students in the classroom, to being what we call an associate principal. And I opened up a brand new 6A high school in one of the largest districts in Texas at the same time. So not only was I new to leadership, I was building an organization from scratch. And you have that moment, what I call the mountaintop of promotion of like, yes, I've got this. I can do this. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. And then I was immediately hit with this landslide of reality of constant problems, conflicts, and constraints. The reality day to day of leaders everywhere. It doesn't matter the industry you're in. You're dealing with problems, conflicts, and constraints. And then I just kind of landed in this valley of despair, not only imposter syndrome. Who am I? Why did they hire me? I don't think I have the skill set. I don't know how to handle conflict. It's overwhelming me. And as you sit in those hard times, they can feel like failure. And what I learned was, you know what? It's actually leadership is learning to navigate that wilderness and showing people how to navigate the wilderness, because there's always going to be a wilderness in leadership. There's always going to be problems, conflicts, and constraints. And so, as I led a couple of years, nothing like a big transition in your life to make a decision. My husband was transferred from Texas back to Arkansas, and I had a decision to make. Am I going to continue in education? Or am I going to step out and do something different? And just kind of praying through that, mulling it over, I felt called to write this book of here's everything that I didn't know going into leadership, but everything I learned the hard way. Like I walk with a limp, y'all. And I always say, don't trust a leader that doesn't walk with a limp. Like I have been through some situations and learned, okay, this is how you navigate that part of the wilderness.
Wow. Well, that's a great story. And thank you for explaining a little bit more about that because that's something that I always find interesting is at what point does a person say, okay, I've acquired this experience, this knowledge. What can I do to share it? And the book is going to be the format. And then we won't take time to go through the whole process of how you wrote the book. But an author myself, I know how much work it takes. So thank you, first of all, for taking the time and putting in the effort to put together such a great book. Something that I really appreciated about the book, and you and I mentioned this very briefly before we started the recording here, and you are a person of faith. I am a person of faith. And you use a lot of analogies, just like the great teacher himself. Talk a little bit more. The great thing about that, Bethany, is that it makes the book, and this is for all of those out there, I would encourage you to get a copy of the book because it's an easy to read book. A lot of great analogies that make it so much easier to understand and at the same time applicable. You can read something and go, okay, I get what she's saying here, and I can do that. But talk a little bit more. Did you have to kind of oh, I don't know, struggle, I guess, to come up with these analogies, or did it just feel like it flowed for you?
Well, I would like to say I'm a simple person. I'm a simple girl and I love visuals. I love analogies. I love metaphors. And all of this, we talked about being a person of faith. As I was wrestling with this wilderness, I'm a high achiever. I am a people pleaser. Like, I want to get the job done. There's a certain level at which I work, and it is a high one. That's the way I used to tackle life. And whenever you feel like your life and your leadership is on the rocks, and now you want to have a drink on the rocks, you meet God in that moment.
Yeah.
And where I met him is through daily Bible study. And he was showing me Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27 at the end of his Sermon on the Mount, where he's talking about this is what it means to live in the kingdom of God. And he talks about the wise man. He heard the words of God, he put them into practice. And when the storms came, when the floods, when in the rain and the storms came and all those things, his house stood firm. And the foolish man who built his life and leadership on the sand elements of life, his house fell. And I'm sitting there wrestling with that. And then it just all came to me about how my leadership, what feels like on the rocks in a negative sense, actually, if I try to live it out through faith and biblical principles and just universal leadership principles, how it will actually be built on the rocks, with the most essential rock being Jesus for me in my faith. But then that transitions that whole phrase. So everything else came of, I'm navigating this wilderness. What do I need? I need a survival backpack. So many of us will get, a title, a team, and a to-do list, but we don't even get a backpack with a granola bar to help us along the way.
Right.
It's like once you're given that title and that influence and that team and that to-do list, how in the world do you navigate it? And that's what I've learned, what I feel like the hard way. So the book is, full of those visual analogies of saying, you know what? You need a compass to guide you. You need that GPS setting to help you go through that. You need a water bottle because, in the book, communication is water, because without communication, your leadership will die. But you know what? Be careful with communication because water can also drown. So
Too much.
there's,
That's right.
yeah. So there's so many visuals, but it's all through that overarching metaphor of what do you need to pack in your leadership survival kit so that you can navigate that wilderness?
Oh, I love it. One of the analogies that you used is kind of the body, that it needs to be nourished and protected. And this is one of the quotes early on in the book that I really liked that I wanted to read and highlight to our viewers and listeners. Leadership is not a destination to be achieved. It is a body to be nourished and protected. And that was such a great visual for me because it was like, yeah, it really isn't. Leadership is not something that you just check off. It's not a box and okay, I've got it. I've got it all figured out. It really is, in my view, a lifetime of pursuit because things are constantly changing. you change as an individual, your perspective changes as an individual, and the people around you change.
Mm.
I'm probably quite a bit older than you are, but nonetheless, there's a noticeable difference in the way the emerging leaders that are coming out of college right now, how they view the world than how I viewed the world at their age. And so the temptation for some of us that are a little bit older, we kind of, I think the word that is often used is projection. We try to project our experiences onto them. We think, okay, the way I learned it is this way, therefore it must work for you.
Mhm.
And I love how you just kind of said, hey, don't, it's just, it's a destination in the sense that there's something that we're working towards, but you never really get there.
Yeah.
It's a process. And I loved how you explained that. And I thought it was really powerful. But to talk a little bit more about your views on this ongoing idea of development in the leadership capacity, because I think like you, and you kind of described it,
Mhm.
people, you get the title and you think, oh, okay, I've got it all figured out then. Somebody believes in me enough to know that I can just do it. And there is a confidence level there, but how do we help others understand the value of ongoing development?
Yeah. You know, leadership is not a destination. We talked about that. It's not the corner office. It's not a title. It's not a paycheck. It's not the status, the feeling of power. True leadership, good quality, great leadership is learning how to navigate that wilderness, but you've got to understand who you are as a leader because you and I are different and we're going to lead differently. And then bring in, Joe Schmo or Jane Smith or whoever, they're going to lead differently. And so much pressure in this world can just weigh us down of I need to be a leader like so and so. I need to be more like him. I need to be more like her. And so much of this is look at your own body of leadership, your head, your mindset. What perspectives are you carrying in? You are gifted and skilled, and you have a perspective that is needed at the table, but you cannot see 360.
Right.
You have to recognize that. So you have to invite other people with different perspectives. So you have the head of leadership, it's mindset. How am I thinking about situations? And then you have the heart of leadership, which is about relationships. That's leadership. Nobody's going to follow you if they don't like you, they don't trust you, they don't respect you. And so the heart of leadership is those relationships. It's how do you connect with other people? How do you communicate? How do you bring the hardest thing you will ever do as a leader is bring people together to communicate and work together to collaborate. And that's so hard, but you've got to learn how to do that. And then you have the hands of leadership, which is execution. Newsflash, they hired you to actually get something done. So they want you to increase profits, increase results, get something done. How do you do that efficiently and effectively when everybody's making demands for your time, talent, and attention? And then you have the guts of leadership. This was the hardest one for me. I told you I'm a recovering people pleaser. And the guts of leadership is accountability. How do I step into those hard conversations and have great stewardship of taking care of and not sweeping things under the rug, but we're going to talk about them even though it's difficult. So how do I own it? That's the own it piece of it. And so once you understand that leadership is a body that you're constantly nourishing and growing, your body as a baby is not the same. You are constantly learning and growing and developing. Then you're a teenager and adolescence. Then you're a young adult. Then you're middle aged. And then you're towards the end of your life and you're full of wisdom and experience. It's the same with leadership. You're constantly working and learning and growing from all of the experiences you've had, and it's just going to make you a better leader. And so your goal is not to look at younger leaders, emerging leaders, and say, hey, do it exactly the way I did. They have a different path, a different body, a different talent, a different perspective. It's encouraging them to continue to grow in their own journey through that as well.
Oh, I love that. Let's talk a little bit more. You mentioned the emerging leaders, which is where I really like to focus as well. What are there's a bunch, obviously, but what would you say are a couple of the biggest, maybe pick one or two challenges that emerging leaders, especially, are having to face and deal with?
Oh, wow. Um, I would say emerging leaders now, they have been raised, and I'm going to say this, I have a young 20 something. And so let's go with, and then also I have a younger brother who's a millennial. It's like my parents had two sets of kids, but they've been married the whole time. So I kind of understand millennials and Generation Z from an outer perspective. I am not those things, but those are the emerging leaders. They have grown up with technology. Now, They've also grown up with social media, and there is a constant feeling of status. They have seen a constant curated portrayal of what good looks like, and they're constantly comparing themselves to that. And so you have to fight through and say, I'm not talking about comparing you to all these other things of what you think you should be. Let's talk about what skills you do have, your strengths, but also let's talk about your constraints. It is not something to be ashamed of.
Right.
And you don't like Generation Z, I am him, bro, like they have all these sayings to help them like pump up their inner selves. I am him is one of them. And it's like, whoa, whoa, humility really does count here. So let's talk about constraints. And it's okay that you have them because we all do. That's why you bring in a team and they will complement your constraints. And so I think looking at the younger generation, it's getting them to shed that curated, filtered layer to get into the gooey stuff in the middle of can you truly identify what you're good at and bring other people along to help you with all the other areas?
No, I love that. I'm going to read a quote from your book here because I think that this was so powerful. Here's the quote: "To lead effectively, we must shine a light on the stories, lies, and false narratives that clutter our thinking. Exposing these mental obstacles allows us to replace them with truths that nourish our confidence and clarity, enabling us to forge ahead with purpose. The biggest battle you'll ever face in leadership and in life is the one in your own head." And wow, that to me was a very powerful statement because we get this thing going and it can mess everything up if we let it. I mean, it's like what happened here, and we can't let that happen. What are some strategies for people to really take control of how they think about themselves and even sometimes how we perceive others?
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's such an amazing question, and I can't even tell you please don't think that on this side of the microphone that I have this all figured out. I live this out every single day, so what I'm fixing to tell you, I do every single day. Um, you know, we usually have a first thought. Our brains are so quick at making snap judgments, right? Think about biology and safety, fight or flight kind of things, but we're also rational thinking, emotional human beings. So in leadership, the biggest thing is you're going to have a thought pop in. And if you let it go, it's going to spiral with all these stories. And it's usually going to make you the victim or the hero and everybody else like the villain or somebody who needs to be rescued. And it's very warped. Our brains easily lie to ourselves. That's if we let that first thought continue to go and spiral down. And so I have learned, and it's very also very biblical to take that thought captive. The first thought that you have, you don't have to let it spiral. You can capture it. And I call it with a mantra. You have to stop that thinking, capture it by saying a phrase, something that allows your brain to pause in order to think through whatever's happening. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And so, one example is let's say my husband wants to cook something and he's like, "Hey, why don't we have any, whatever ingredient? Why don't we have any popcorn?" My first story is going to be, "I'm so sorry that I didn't have time to go get you some more popcorn." Like I'm immediately making him the villain and I'm the victim of he is judging me as a wife that we don't have all the things that he needs. That's a story. And so one way is to easily um you know, capture that thought is to say, what is he really saying? Uh, he didn't mean anything by it. He just wants some
Right.
popcorn. So I've got to stop that story. Now let's put that in a work thing. Whenever you're a leader, you're constantly dealing with conflict. You're dealing with people with lots of opinions or heated emotions. And so I have, as an administrator, I have dealt with a lot of angry parents. I have been cussed out. I've been spit on twice.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so whenever you're dealing with that, you have to not, bow up and be all defensive and just like, how dare they insult me, disrespect me? You can't let that story go. You have to capture that thought and say, what's behind this person's emotion? I have to stay curious.
Yeah.
And so one of my mantras that I say, and I have so many different ones, is slow my roll. That's one I say a lot for any kind of situation, family or work. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Be quick to listen and slow to speak. What's behind this person's emotion? How can I ask questions to learn more about why they're so heated, about why they're so passionate, or why they're so angry, or whatever? And by stopping my train of thought with a mantra, with any kind of phrase, then I can stay curious, ask more questions, and it helps me lead better in that moment. So it's so important. And I love that phrase. And I say it to myself often, the biggest battle I'm facing right now is the one in my own head. I turn it around on me and it slows me down. It slows my anxiety and it helps me think more clearly.
No, it's such a great perspective and great thought affirmations because and this is and maybe it sounds like you and I had a similar type experience, although yours was far more impactful because of the amount of people that you were leading. I had a similar experience in the sense that I was back in college. I had a little part-time job and I was asked to be the team leader. And here I am. I have made it. I've arrived. They've recognized me. I'm validated. I know exactly what to do. And then there was this emotional wear and tear that started to take place. And this was just a little tiny job. This was a little part-time thing. I loved the job. I did it for many years, but I was caught off guard a little bit with wow, I wasn't expecting kind of this emotional journey. And you talked about that valley of despair. And you have an image in the book about this mountainside. We think we're at the top and then it slides down. And here we
Jumanji
go.
level 5.
That's right. It's like, oh. And so that's something that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this with you to our audience, especially those emerging leaders. If you're running into that, it's it's normal, first of all, to have some emotional roller coastering. And that's part of why I wanted to bring this up is to be prepared for that. And if you've experienced that or you are experiencing that, there are some ways to deal with it. And Bethany has given us some really great ideas on how we can manage kind of our thought processes around ourselves and around others. But I love that you said stay curious. I love that you said we got to kind of slow it down a little bit. We have to think. We have to be willing to listen and get to the kind of the behind the scenes of why they're reacting emotionally. And that's hard because we're reacting emotionally. So that's a tough one. I'd love to talk a little bit. You spend, I mean, we could spend hours going through the whole book, to be honest with you, but there were a couple of areas that I really felt were especially impactful for emerging leaders to consider. And this is one that I felt was really important. It goes along similar to what we're talking about, but you put in the book, instead of looking left or right for validation, look up and within to discover your true purpose and identity. And I love that. I love that connective tissue with God or whatever supreme being a person chooses to believe, but also to look within. And you talked about earlier about the strengths and some of those things. What can emerging leaders or other leaders of any kind really do to stop the comparison and really get into a healthy mental state and also to see the good that everybody else on the team brings to the table? Because sometimes we kind of both talked about it. We kind of get that
Yeah.
pride in it. Hey, I've got it figured out here, but probably not yet.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
That is such a big question, and I feel like we all need to go through therapy to, like, analyze that one. You
Yes.
know, but it does start with who are you? Do you know who you are? I mean, do you know that you're worthy? Do you know that you don't have to seek affirmation and validation from other people to exist? And those are things that you have to grapple with within yourself and with, your faith. And so the comparison thing is you come to the realization that I am worthy and I'm made to serve others. It's not just about me. I am not in competition with other people. I can support and be happy for you. I'm not competing against you. I'm here to do my job and to do it well and to serve the group in front of me, no matter what industry you're in. I'm here to serve well and I can cheer for other people. So once you start saying those things and believing those things because they're true about yourself, it changes everything. It's like taking off the pair of glasses, like I wear glasses, taking those off and putting on a pair of like gratitude lenses. It's not rose-colored glasses where everything's beautiful, but now you just see everybody differently.
Yeah.
And you stand more firm of, you know what? My title, my paycheck, my mistake, those don't label me for life. They're learning experiences, but nothing labels me because I know who I am without a paycheck. I know who I am without a title. I know who I am before the mistake and after the mistake. And so leaning into that strong identity will also reveal your purpose, your calling of and I know what I bring to the table. So just for me personally, I bring, brainstorming. Man, I love ideation. I love coming together and saying, what are the different ways we can solve this problem? But I also know what I don't bring. I don't bring heavy execution. I've got to be paired with somebody who's like, okay, here's actually how we're going to implement the idea. And so me knowing what I bring to the table, again, as a leader, guess what? They hired me to execute. I need to have people on my team that can help bring that to fruition. Um, and so that's understanding who you are with or without the title, with or without the paycheck, with or without the status. And then it just changes your lens for looking at everybody else as well.
Oh, I love that. And you mentioned also in the book about viewing people and the differences that we all have, not as obstacles, but as assets.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that is, and you were just talking about that, but when we are with people that offset and complement our strengths, there's some real unity there. But boy, I'll tell you what, as a leader, I believe that that's one of the most important, perhaps even sacred responsibilities that a leader has is to empower others. And you can't do that if you're too worried about yourself. You've
Yeah.
got to you've got to understand yourself. You have to have the self-awareness, but you've got to find a way to empower the others around and everybody to see everybody else because it's
Yeah.
not, you know this better than anyone. It's not, you're dealing with conflict, but a lot of times the conflict is not between a team member and you as the leader. A lot of times it's the other folks dealing with each other and you have to
Yeah.
mediate.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to try and resolve it. But what are your any additional thoughts before we move on?
Thank you for allowing me to space because I did have one. Something I really battled with was image management as a young leader. It's making sure that I have a perception, that curated perception, that I know what I'm doing, I have it all figured out, I'm confident, um, and I just and therefore the internal stress to appear to wear that mask of appearance wore me out. And whenever you're wearing a mask, it's unsustainable. And so, learning to release that image management and being more authentic, and when you make a mistake, when you get something wrong and owning it and just saying, thank you so much for your grace in this, here's what I've learned from this, and going forward, here's how I'm going to do it differently. I remember one time, I had a couple of secretaries that worked with me, and one was so she was amazing in organization, but I was such a control freak. We were planning this activity. I did everything. And I didn't delegate anything. I didn't bring her along with her amazing skills and strengths because I wanted it to look good. I had a vision for where it needed to go. I was just, listen to this, me, 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 me. You hear it all in there. And then afterward, she's like, I feel like you didn't value me. You didn't bring me to the table to help you. And then I started, you are right. So I learned to bring people along in the ideation stages of this. I told you that was my favorite, right? Ideation, bring him along. But then saying, where can you, and I let them choose first, right? Of, okay, here's my part in what I take in this. And so I've just learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I told you I'm walking with a limp over here.
Well, it's a great example of what can happen in leadership, and I think all of us have done that to at least I know I have. I know that I have been actually told that same job I was referring to, ironically, I was actually told, and they meant it as a compliment. And so I don't want to make it sound like I'm bad mouthing the supervisors that promoted me into that position, but they basically said, Shawn, you've done such a great job. We need 10 of you on this team. So go make everybody like you. So I did,
Mm.
or at least I tried to.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. And so another quote from your book that I really, really liked that relates to this idea that it's not about making everybody like us, but embracing and letting other people play a part and take some initiative, take a lead, even though you're the leader by title, but let them take the lead. But this is what you said in your book. Coaching isn't about taking over the work, but about guiding the team through challenges, offering constructive guidance, and reinforcing positive progress. And I
Mhm.
really like that. That's just such a great, simple, straightforward, but powerful definition of what it means to coach somebody, to work with them, because you know this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this idea of delegation, because that is something that, in my view, almost all leaders really struggle with it
Yeah.
because they either don't do it at all, which is kind of what you ran into, or they don't do it well because they're not sure how much to give, how much do they retain. They have this vision, or the vision was given to them by
Yeah.
a person even further up. But how can we simplify delegation?
Whew, such a good question. There's so much in there. We're talking about coaching, we're talking about delegation. And so many people will, delegate it and just say, "Oh, go forth and do. I trust your leadership." But they have no idea what good looks like. You've given them no expectation, no idea of what they're supposed to turn in. It's like you're turning them out into the abyss and be like, "Bring me something cool back."
Yeah.
Where am I going? What am I doing? What do you want? And I can't tell you how many people, let's go with even creating a presentation. What do you want on this thing? Like, what's the storyboard? What's the messaging? And so you have to give guidance. You have to have clarity. The team has to have clarity on what's the purpose, what's the message, and so that it all ties together. So there has to be a little bit of this is the exact target we're going for. And then you don't just delegate to somebody who has no skills. And so as a leader, you're wearing such multiple hats and it's going to be different based upon the person in front of you. One person that is a seasoned employee on the team, I can, once we have clarity as a team on what we're doing, I can truly release them to go and do. They know the expectation, they've been taught, they have the skill set. Go forth and do. You are empowered. Another leader that's on the team or employee, it's like, "Hey, I've got to equip you in this first."
Right.
And so we're going to kind of walk it together. I'm going to do some coaching. And whenever I say coaching, we can talk about leadership coaching and it sounds so highfalutin frou-frou. Think of sports. You know,
Yes.
Michael Jordan had a coach. Michael Jordan's the best. Okay, you could say LeBron James, you could say Kobe Bryant, but whatever. Pick one
I'm
of the
with you,
three.
though.
Yeah,
Michael
any
Jordan,
of those
Jordan.
three. Excellent basketball players. They all had coaches. They all had teams. They can't go out. Michael Jordan and the Bulls in the 90s, he couldn't go out and win a championship by himself. He had to have Scottie Pippen, who might I want to add is from Arkansas. I just had to throw that out there. But
Good
so
plug. Good plug.
yeah, you've got to have the awareness, and the whole point of coaching is think about the coaches on the sideline. They have a different perspective. Go with any, now we're going to switch to football. You have the quarterback. He's watching the line, but he can't see everything, everything, everything. You have a coach, you have an offensive coordinator who does see a broader perspective, and that's who you are as the leader. I've been around, I've seen some things, I see a broader perspective, I've seen more scenarios than you. So let's talk about what happened on the field in the scenario you went through, and let's talk you through it and come up with a game plan for next time. And so that's the point of coaching within delegation. I hope that makes sense. I know it was a really
Yeah.
long answer,
No,
but
no, no, no.
with delegation, first clarity before capacity. And then you got to say, okay, do they have the skills to be successful? So, what does good look like? What's the expectation? Do they have the skills? Equip before you empower.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I like that you also, in a great way, brought in kind of a sports analogy because I have found that sports, and I mean I love sports, but there's not just the competitive part of sports do I like. I also like that there are so many little lessons in sports that are easy to understand.
Hmm.
And you talked about that. You talked about everybody needs a coach and the offensive coordinator. A lot of the offensive coordinators in football, they're up in a booth
Yeah.
somewhere, and they got the binoculars, and they're doing all this, and they got the headset that they're communicating down, but they're not there on the field, and that's by design. And it brings up so many great ideas about what leadership has the potential to be if we'll let others help us in the process and not feel like we've got it all figured out ourselves and that I don't need any more help because I've been promoted to this title. And that's just it's not the way it needs to be. It just doesn't need to be this way.
Yeah.
Well, this is wonderful. There's just a couple of more questions here. We'll start to kind of wrap it up. Bethany, what are you hoping that readers will come away? They finish reading the book. What are some of the things that you're hoping they'll come away with? And I'm sure everybody will have a slightly different answer to that. But I'd be curious to know what you would ideally like to see the reader come away with.
It's honestly that it's a process. It's a wilderness that you're constantly navigating and you're getting better and you're learning how to, and the book says it, how to survive. First of all, you got to survive. But then how to adapt and then how to navigate. And like, you mentioned this, it's not that you ever truly arrive because you can always get better. And so I think the thing out of the book, you have to be very careful with self-help. Self-help books can say, just follow my 10-step plan and everything's going to be peachy. And that's not what this book is. The book is leadership is a wilderness. You're constantly navigating problems, conflicts, constraints. So learn the skill sets and start developing them deeper and deeper and deeper after every experience that you have. And you're going to learn how to navigate that wilderness better, better, better. And then you turn around and say, hey, other people, emerging leaders, this is how we navigate. And you help teach them how to use the compass. You teach them how to, have water. You teach them how to use that survival backpack. And therefore, they can navigate their own journey ahead. And so I think all that being said, my big thing is there's no 10-step plan in this book that if you just check these boxes, because it's not that easy. Leadership is just not that easy. Leadership is hard, but you can learn to navigate it successfully.
Yeah, that's such a great way to say that. I appreciate that because it that is a challenge that I see in leadership development as well, is that it's a one size fits all approach that just follow this and you'll be a great leader. Or sometimes we'll ask, well, what do we like about so and so and how they lead? And we do that comparison thing that we talked about earlier that we want to avoid. There's always things to learn from other leaders and how they do things. We're not suggesting that, but we are suggesting that if you try too hard to emulate something that you're not, you're going to struggle. You're going to create friction within yourself, kind of an inner conflict, and that's going to erode the enjoyment of leadership. You said it, Bethany. Leadership is hard. It can be a lot of fun. It can be very rewarding, very satisfying, because you have to be willing to put yourself on the back burner. You have to be willing to elevate the others around you, at least some of the time, if not most of the time, if not all the time. You have to be willing to do that. I'll give you the final word here in your book, and then I'll wrap us up. And anything else you'd like to just kind of highlight from the book? I mean, I could go on for hours, but what are your thoughts?
Um, so many, but being a leader, you're also setting the example for so many emerging leaders. And I know that you like to focus on that so much, and it's so important. And I'm glad that you do. Let's talk about work-life harmony for a second. And notice I didn't use the word balance.
Yes.
So often we emulate the leaders that we've seen that came before us, and we just do what they did. And I want you to recognize the power, the authority, and the example that you're setting for everybody who works with and for you. And think about that, because if you're working 24/7, checking your email at all hours of the night, that's now the expectation for them as well. And so as you navigate leadership and we talk about serving other people, I just want to say, don't forget to lead your family. Don't forget to lead all the other aspects of your life. This is not just about work. You are a leader. Whenever you clock out at 5, you go home to your next job, leading your family. And even if your
Right.
kids, even if you don't have kids, even if your kids are gone, you still have a wife, a husband, or you have family, or you have friends, or you have your own mental capacity. And so as you learn to navigate leadership, everything in the book that we talk about how to navigate is also applicable in the home of navigating, but remember to lead at home as well.
Oh, I love that. It's a great way to remind us that we all have the opportunity to lead, even if you don't have the title or the promotion, even if you don't have necessarily an organized team. You can be a leader in your community by simply embracing these principles that Bethany and I have been talking about here for the last half hour or whatever it's been. I'm going to end with this little quote here and then wrap it up. This was just, I think it was my favorite one. It was towards the end of the book, which makes sense. And you just said, survival isn't the final goal, thriving is.
Mhm.
Thriving means embracing the process of progress, not perfection. It means recognizing that leadership is less about reaching a destination and more about becoming the kind of leader who can adapt, grow, and inspire others along the way. It's about using the lessons you've learned to build something enduring, not just for yourself, but for those you lead. Great way to kind of wrap up not just the book, but our little discussion today. But Bethany, thank you again for taking time to be on the podcast. I encourage everybody to pick up a copy of her book. Bethany, where can they find it? I should probably give you a plug there where to find it.
Thank you. So Leadership on the Rocks can be found on Amazon. You can also go to leadershipontherocks.com. Everything is at leadershipontherocks.com. And again, you can get the book on Amazon, but you can find me, my podcast, connect with me. So please make sure that you find me. I'm also on socials. Guess what? Under Leadership on the Rocks.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you who are participating by either watching or listening. We encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day. This is Shawn Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Be sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And for more leadership tips, pick up your copy of Rapid Fire Leadership by going to rapidfireleadership.com, where you can also download free resources to help you in your leadership role. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.